Alfonso Corti, an Italian anatomist, was born in 1822. Corti began his scientific career studying in cardiovascular system of reptiles. Later, later he turned his attention to the mammalian auditory system. In 1851, he published a paper describing a structure of located on the basilar membrane of a cochlea containing hair cells that convert sound vibration into nerve impulses. The organ of Corti. He died in year 1888. कार्डियोवास्कुलर सिस्टम ऑफ रेप्टाइल्स में फर्स्ट इसने साइंटिफिक करियर का स्टडी करना चालू किया मैमेलियन ऑडिटरी सिस्टम पे उसके बाद किया और कॉक्लिया कंटेनिंग हेयर सेल्स दैट कन्वर्ट साउंड टू वाइब्रेशन कॉक्लिया कंटेनिंग हेयर साउंड वाइब्रेशन इनटू नर्व इम्पल्स किया है breathing and external. As you have read earlier, oxygen auto utilized by the organism indirectly break down in simple molecules like glucose, amino acids, fatty acid, etc. To drive energy to perform various activities, carbon dioxide, CO2, which is harmful, is also released. During the above catabolic reaction, it is therefore evident that O2 has to be continuously provided to the cell and CO2 produced by the cell have to be released out. This process of exchange of O2 from the atmosphere with CO2 produced by the cells is called breathing, commonly known as respiration. Place your hand on your chest. You can feel the chest moving up and down. You know that it is due to the breathing. How do we breathe? The respiratory organ and mechanism of breathing are described in the following section of chapter. Mechanism of breathing vary among different group of animals depending mainly on their habitat and level of organization. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelacanths, platform, etc. Exchange O2 with the help of CO2 by simple diffusion over their entire body surface. Lower invertebrates like sponges, coelacanths or platform वो अपना exchange करते हैं CO2 by simple diffusion over their entire surface. Earthworm use their moist cuticle and insect have a network of tubes. Earthworm अपने moist cuticle से करते हैं और insect के पास network of tubules है जिसको हम tracheal tube बोलते हैं to transfer atmosphere within the body. Special vascularized structure called gills, branchial respiration are used by the most of aquatic arthropods. Aquatic arthropods के पास gill होते हैं. Mollusk whereas vascularized back called lungs. Mollusca के पास lungs है जिसको हम permanent respiration बोलते हैं जो हमारे पास होता है are used by the terrestrial form for the exchange of gases. Among vertebrates, fishes use gills, whereas amphibians, reptiles, birds and mammals respire through lungs. Fishes gills का use करते हैं और amphibian, reptiles, birds और mammals lungs का. Amphibians like frog can respire through their moist skin. Example, cutaneous skin also. Amphibian अपने cuticle skin से भी respiration कर सकते हैं. We have a pair of external nostril opening about above the upper lip. It leads to the nasal chamber through the nasal passage. The nasal chamber open into the pharynx, a portion which is a common passage for food and air. Pharynx is a common passage for food and air. Pharynx is a common passage for food and air. The pharynx open through the larynx into larynx region into the trachea. Larynx is a cartilaginous box which help in sound production. Larynx sound production करता है, hence called sound box. Larynx is called as sound box. During swelling, glottis can be covered by thin elastic cartilaginous flap called epiglottis. Glottis covered by thin flap by when we eat food to prevent the entry of food into the larynx. Trachea is a straight tube extending up to the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at the level of fifth thoracic vertebrae into a right and left primary bronchia. Trachea is a straight tube extending up on the mid-thoracic cavity, which divides at level fifth thoracic vertebrae into a right and left primary bronchia. Each bronchia and bronchiole ending up in a very thin terminal bronchioles. The trachea, primary, secondary, and tertiary bronchia. Initial bronchia are supported by the incomplete cartilaginous ring. Initial bronchioles are supported by thin incomplete cartilaginous rings. Each terminal bronchiole gives rise to a number of very thin, irregular, and vascular bag-like structure called alveoli. The branching network of bronchioles, alveoli comprise the lungs. Figure 40. We have two lungs which are covered by double-layered pleura and with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. Pleura with pleural fluid between them. It reduces friction on the lung surface. The outer pleural membrane is in close contact with the thoracic lining, whereas the inner pleural membrane is in contact with the lungs. Inner pleural membrane, inner होता है प्लूरल, आउटर दो प्लूरल मेम्ब्रेन है, बीच में प्लूरल फ्लूइड होता है. इन आउटर वाले को हम प्लूरा बोलते हैं, आउटर को प्लूरल मेम्ब्रेन और इनर वाले को मास्कुलर बोलते हैं. इनर प्लूरल मेम्ब्रेन इज इन कॉन्टेक्ट विद द लंग्स ऑफ अ सरफेस. लंग्स ऑफ अ सरफेस के इनर पार्ट लंग्स ऑफ अ सरफेस के कॉन्टेक्ट में आता है. द पार्ट स्टार्टिंग विद एक्सटर्नल नोस्ट्रल्स up to the terminal bronchioles constitute the conducting part, whereas terminal bronchioles nostrils से terminal bronchioles तक है conducting part, whereas the alveoli and the ducts form the respiratory or extend of extend part of the respiratory system. The conducting part transport the atmospheric air to the alveoli, clears temperature, clears it from foreign particles, humidifies, and also brings air to the body to temperature. Extend part is the site of actual diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmosphere. Extend part is the actual site of diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and atmospheric air. The lungs are situated in the thoracic chamber, which is anatomically airtight chamber. Lungs जो है thoracic chamber जो कि airtight chamber है. The thoracic chamber is formed dorsally by the vertebral column. The thoracic chamber is formed by dorsally vertebral column, ventrally by sternum, laterally by the ribs, on the lower side of the dome-shaped diaphragm. The anatomical setup of lungs in thorax is such that any change in the volume of a thoracic cavity will be reflected in the lungs pulmonary cavity. Such an arrangement is essential for breathing, as we cannot directly alter the pulmonary volume. Respiration involves following breathing or pulmonary ventilation, by which atmospheric air is drawn in and CO2 rich alveoli is released out. Diffusion of gases O2 CO2 across alveolar membrane. Transport of gases by the blood. Diffusion of O2 and CO2 between blood and tissue. Utilization of O2 by the cells for catabolic reaction and resultant release of CO2. Mechanism of breathing. Breathing involves two stages: inspiration, during which atmospheric air is drawn in, and expiration, by which alveoli is released out. The movement of air into and out of the lungs is carried out by creating pressure gradient between the lungs and atmosphere. Inspiration can occur if the pressure within the lungs, intrapulmonary pressure, is less than the atmospheric pressure. That is, there is a negative pressure in the lungs with respect to the atmosphere. Similarly, expiration takes place when pulmonary pressure is higher than the atmospheric pressure. The diaphragm and specialized sets of muscles, external and internal costal muscles between the ribs, help in generation of such gradient. The diaphragm and specialized set of muscles, external and intercostal muscles between the ribs, help in generation of such gradient. Inspiration is initiated by contraction of diaphragm, which increase the volume of thoracic chamber in the anterior posterior axis. Inspiration is initiated by contraction of diaphragm. Diaphragm के contract होने से increase होता है volume of thoracic chamber. Volume of chamber increase होता है in anterior posterior axis में. The contraction of external intercostal muscle lift up the ribs. Sternum causing an increase in the volume of a thoracic chamber in the dorsoventral axis. Sternum की वजह से dorsoventral axis में भी volume increase करता है. The overall increase in thoracic volume causes a similar increase in pulmonary volume. The overall increase in thoracic volume causes a similar increase in pulmonary volume. An increase in pulmonary volume decreases the intrapulmonary pressure to less than the atmospheric pressure, which forces the air from outside to move into the lungs. That is inspiration. Relaxation of the diaphragm and relaxation of diaphragm and intercostal muscles returns the diaphragm and sternum to their normal position and reduces the thoracic volume and thereby the pulmonary volume. This leads to an increase in intrapulmonary pressure or to slightly above the atmospheric pressure, causing the expulsion of air from the lungs. Expiration. We have the ability to increase the strength of inspiration and expiration with the help of additional muscles in the abdomen. On an average, a healthy human breathes 12 to 16 times per minute. The volume of air involved in breath movement can be estimated by using a spirometer which help in clinical assessment of pulmonary function. The volume of air in breathing movement can be estimated using by spirometer, which help in clinical assessment of pulmonary function. लोग डायग्राम में लिखा है एयर एंट्रिंग लंग्स, डायफ्राम कॉन्टैक्ट करता है, फिर वॉल्यूम थोरैक्स इंक्रीज करता है, रिप्स इंस्ट्रूमेंट भी राइज करते हैं रिप, ये है इंस्पायरेशन। एक्सपायरेशन डायफ्राम रिलैक्स करता है, एयर एक्सपायर आउट होते हैं, रिप्स इंस्ट्रूमेंट कॉन्टैक्ट करता है, वॉल्यूम ऑफ थोरैक्स भी डिक्रीज हो जाता है। रेस्पिरेटरी वॉल्यूम इज कैपेसिटी। टाइडल वॉल्यूम, volume of air inspired during a normal respiration. It is approximately 500 ml. A healthy man can inspire or expire approximately 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter of air per minute. 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter per minute. 6,000 to 8,000 milliliter per minute और 5,000 ml tidal volume कहलाता है। 500 ml tidal volume कहलाता है, जो कि एक घंटा में नॉर्मल ले लेता है। इंस्पायरेटरी रिजर्व वॉल्यूम, हमारे पास रिजर्व वॉल्यूम होता है। अब एडिशन वॉल्यूम ऑफ एयर अ पर्सन कैन इंस्पायर बाय फोर्सिबल एक्सपायरेशन, दिस एवरेजेस 2,500 ml to 3,000 ml, 2,500 ml to 3,000 ml, 2,500 ml to 3,000 ml. Inspiratory reserve वॉल्यूम, expiratory reserve वॉल्यूम, addition volume of air a person can expire by forcible expansion, this average 1,000 ml to 1,100 ml. Residual volume, volume of air remaining in the lungs even after forcible expiration, this average is 1,100 to 1,200 ml. By adding up a few respiratory volumes described above, one can derive various pulmonary capacity which can use in a clinical diagnosis. Inspiratory capacity, total volume of air person can inspire after normal expiration. This includes tidal volume plus inspiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume, total volume of air person can expire on normal inspiration. This includes tidal volume and expiratory reserve volume. Functional residual volume, volume of air that will remain in the lungs after normal inspiration. This includes IRV plus RV, ERV plus RV, ERV, expiratory reserve volume plus residual volume. Vital capacity, the maximum volume of air person can breathe in after a forced expiration. This includes ERV, inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, expiratory reserve volume, or the maximum volume of air of a person can breathe out after a forced expiration is the vital capacity. Total lung capacity, total lung is ERV, RV, TRV, vital capacity को मिला के होता है वाइटल कैपेसिटी प्लस रेसिडुअल वॉल्यूम, उसको बोलते हैं टोटल लंग्स कैपेसिटी, TLC, PC, वाइटल कैपेसिटी पे रेसिडुअल वॉल्यूम नहीं आते। हम एक बार में कितना देखते हैं वाइटल कैपेसिटी। एक्सचेंज ऑफ गैसेस, alveoli are the primary site of gases. Alveoli are the primary sites of exchange of gases. Alveoli are the primary site of exchange of gases. Exchange of gases also occur between the blood and tissue. O2 and CO2. O2 and CO2 are exchanged in this site by simple diffusion, mainly based on the pressure concentration gradient. Pressure concentration gradient की वजह से solubility of the gas as well as the thickness of the membrane involved in the diffusion are also some important factors that can affect the rate of diffusion. Solubility of gases as well as the thickness of the membrane involved in the diffusion are also some important factors that can affect rate of diffusion. Pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of a gas is called partial pressure. Pressure contributed by an individual gas in a mixture of a gas is called partial pressure and is represented as partial pressure of O2 for oxygen and partial pressure of CO2 for carbon dioxide. Partial pressure of these two gases in the atmospheric air and these sites of diffusion are given in table, and the data given in the table clearly indicate the concentration gradient for oxygen and from alveoli to blood and blood to tissues. Similarly, to the table, respiratory gas O2 और CO2, O2 एटमॉस्फेरिक प्रेशर में, O2 का एटमॉस्फेयर प्रेशर है 159, एल्वेला में है 104, ब्लड डीऑक्सीजन में है 40, ब्लड ऑक्सीजनेट में 95, फिर टिश्यू में 40, टिश्यू में और डीऑक्सीजन ब्लड में 40 है, ठीक है। एल्वेला में 104 है और टिश्यू में अब ऑक्सीजनेट ब्लड में 95 है, ठीक है। CO2 का एटमॉस्फेयर में 0.3 है, इट इज़ वेरी कम। एल्वेला में 40 है, ब्लड डीऑक्सीजन में 45 है, टिश्यू में 45 है और ऑक्सीजन ब्लड में 40 है, ऑक्सीजन ब्लड में 40 है। Pressure gradient is present for CO2 in the opposite direction, that is from tissue to blood and blood to alveoli. Tissue to blood and blood to alveoli. Look at that. Inspired air, expired air का participation of O2 0.4 and alveoli में 0.104 and participation of CO2 400 mmHg alveoli में. और ऑक्सीजन ब्लड में ये रहा हमारा ऑक्सीजन ब्लड, ऑक्सीजन 95 mmHg O2 का और 40 mmHg कार्बन का. फिर 40 mmHg डीऑक्सीजन में ऑक्सीजन का और 45 कार्बन का. As the solubility of CO2 is as the solubility of CO2 is 20 to 25 times higher than that of O2. The amount of CO2 that can diffuse through the diffusion membrane per unit difference in partial pressure is much higher compared to O2. Why higher? Because 20 to 25 100% acceleration में है. The diffusion membrane is made up of three layers. The diffusion membrane is made up of three major layers, namely a thin squamous epithelium of alveoli. Alveoli का thin squamous epithelium है. Thin squamous epithelium. The endothelium of alveolar capillaries and the basement substance is composed of a thin basement membrane supporting squamous epithelium and basement membrane. Thin basement membrane जो कि सब करता है, ठीक है. Surrounding the single layer endothelial cells of capillaries. In between them. However, its total thickness is much less than a millimeter. Millimeter से भी पतले होते हैं, millimeter. Therefore, all factors in our body are favorable for diffusion of O2 from alveolar tissue, that of CO2 from alveolar tissues to alveolar. Therefore, all the factors in our body are favorable for diffusion of O2 from alveolar tissue, and that of CO2 from tissues to alveolar. Transport of gases. Blood is a medium of transport of O2 and CO2. About 97% of O2 is dissolved by transport RBC in the blood. The remaining 3% of O2 is carried out in dissolved state through plasma. Nearly 20 to 25% of CO2 are transported by RBC, whereas 70% of it is carried by bicarbonate. About 7% CO2 is carried dissolved state through plasma. 7% कार्बन डिसॉल्व होते हैं, 70% बाइकार्बोनेट के फॉर्म में, और 20 से 25% आरबीसी के थ्रू, 97% ऑक्सीजन आरबीसी के थ्रू, और 3% प्लाज्मा में डिफ्यूज होता है. ठीक है, पहले ट्रांसपोर्ट ऑफ ऑक्सीजन. Hemoglobin is a red-colored iron-containing pigment present in the RBCs. O2 can bind with hemoglobin in a reversible manner to form oxyhemoglobin. Each hemoglobin molecule can carry a maximum 4 molecules of O2. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is primarily related to the partial pressure of O2, the partial pressure of CO2, hydrogen ion, concentration and temperature. Binding of oxygen with hemoglobin is primarily related to partial pressure of O2, partial pressure of CO2, hydrogen ion, concentration and temperature are the factors which can interfere with this binding. A sigmoid curve is obtained when percentage saturation of hemoglobin with O2 is plotted against the partial pressure of O2. This curve is called oxygen dissociation curve and is highly useful for studying the effect of factors like partial pressure of carbon dioxide as well as concentration extraction on binding of O2 with hemoglobin. In alveoli, where there is a high partial pressure of O2 and low partial pressure of CO2, lesser H plus concentration and lower temperature, the factors are favorable for the formation of oxyhemoglobin. Where in the tissue where low partial pressure of O2, high partial pressure of CO2, high H plus concentration and higher temperature exist, the conditions are favorable for dissociation of oxygen from oxyhemoglobin from the oxygen. This clearly indicates that the O2 gets bound to hemoglobin or bound to hemoglobin in the lungs surface and gets dissociated at the tissue. लंग्स में बाइंड करता है और टिश्यू में डिसोसिएट करता है every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver around 5 ml of O2 to the tissue undergo normal physiological condition. Every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can deliver 5 ml of O2 5 ml of O2 to the tissue under normal physiological condition. Segment कर पा रहा है partial pressure of oxygen है और इधर है percentage of hemoglobin in 1000. Transport of carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is carried by hemoglobin as amino hemoglobin about 20 to 25%. This binding is related to the partial pressure of CO2. Partial pressure of O2 is a major factor which could affect this binding. When partial pressure of CO2 is partial pressure of O2 is low. Partial pressure of O2 is low, as in the tissue. More binding of carbon dioxide occurs, whereas when the partial pressure of CO2 is low, partial pressure of O2 is high, is in alveoli. Dissociation of CO2 from carb amino hemoglobin takes place. That is CO2 which is bound to the hemoglobin from the tissue delivered to the alveoli. RBC contain a very high concentration of the enzymes carbonic anhydrase and minute quantities of same is present in the plasma too. This enzyme facilitates the following reaction in both direction. CO2 plus H2O give H2CO3, HCCO3 minus plus H2 carbonic anhydrase इसके present. And this is where partial pressure of CO2 is high due to catabolism. CO2 diffuses into the blood, RBC and plasma and form SCO3, H plus and H plus. At alveolar side where partial pressure of CO2 is low, the reaction proceeds in the opposite direction leading to the formation of CO2 plus H2O and the CO2 trapped as bicarbonate at tissue level and transported to the alveoli is released out as a CO2. Every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood delivers approximately 4 ml of CO2 to the alveoli. Regulation of respiration. Human beings have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory system to suit the demands of the body's tissues. This is done by nervous system, a specialized center in the medulla region of the brain called respiratory rhythm center. मेडुला में होता है रेस्पिरेटरी सेंटर मेडुला में होता है इस प्राइमरी रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर रेगुलेशन अनदर सेंटर प्रेजेंट पोन्स में प्रेजेंट है न्यूमोरेडी पी से न्यूमो टॉक्सिक सेंटर अनदर सेंटर पोन्स रीजन ऑफ द ब्रेन कॉल्ड न्यूमोटॉक्सिक सेंटर कैन मॉडरेट द फंक्शन ऑफ रेस्पिरेटरी रिदम सेंटर रेस्पिरेटरी रिदम में मॉडरेट कर सकते हैं रेगुलेशन करता है मॉडरेट करता है न्यूमोटॉक्सिक Neural signals from this center can reduce the duration of inspiration and thereby alter the respiration rate. A chemosensitive area is situated adjacent to the rhythm center. Adjacent to the rhythm center. Adjacent to the rhythm center is highly sensitive for CO2 and H plus ion. Highly sensitive to CO2 and H plus ion. Increase in this substance can activate this center, which in turn can signal the rhythm of center to make necessary adjustment in the respiratory process by which this substance can be eliminated. Receptors associated with aortic arc and carotid artery also can recognize changes in CO2 and H plus concentration. Receptors associated with aortic arc and carotid artery also can recognize changes in CO2 H plus and send necessary signal to the rhythm center for remedial action. The role of oxygen in respiratory rhythm center is quite insignificant. The role of oxygen in regulation of respiratory rhythm center is quite insignificant. Disorders. Asthma is a difficulty in breathing causing wheezing due to the inflammation. Causing wheezing due to the inflammation of a bronchi or bronchioles. Emphysema is a chronic disorder in which alveolar walls are damaged. Emphysema Emphysema is a chronic disorder in which alveolar wall damage due to the pitch decrease. Decrease. One of the major cause of is this cigarette. Emphysema, cigarette. Occupational respiratory. In a certain industries, especially those involving greening and strong magnets, so much dust is produced that defense mechanism of the body cannot be fully cope with the situation. Long exposure can give rise to inflammation leading to fibrosis. Proliferation of a fibrous tissue, fibrosis, thus causing serious lung damage. Worker in such industry should wear a protective mask. Summary: cell utilize oxygen for metabolism. For metabolism and produce energy along with the substance like carbon dioxide, which is harmful. Animals have evolved different mechanisms for the transport of oxygen to cells and for the removal of carbon dioxide from there. We have well-designed respirators comparing two lungs and associated with the air passes to form this function. The first step in respiration is breathing, by which atmosphere is taken and the alveoli is released out. The action of O2 and CO2 between deoxygen blood and alveoli. Transport of these gases throughout the body by blood, action of O2 and CO2 between oxygenated blood and tissue, and utilization of O2 by the cellular respiration are the other steps involved. Inspiration and expiration are carried out by creating pressure gradient between the atmosphere and the alveoli with the help of a specialized muscles in intercostal and diaphragm. Volumes of air involved in these activities can be estimated with the help of spirometer and clinical significance. Action of O2 and CO2 at the alveoli and tissue occurs by diffusion. Rate of diffusion is dependent on the partial pressure of a gradient O2, pressure of O2 and CO2, and the solubility as well as the thickness of the diffusion of the surface. These factors of our body facilitate diffusion of O2 from the alveoli to the deoxygenated blood as well as from oxygen blood to the tissue. The factors are favorable for the diffusion of CO2 in the opposite direction, that is from tissues to alveoli. Oxygen is transported mainly as an oxyhemoglobin in the alveolus as partial pressure of O2 is higher. O2 gets bound off hemoglobin, which is easily registered at the tissue where partial pressure of O2 is low, partial pressure of CO2 and express concentration high. Nearly 70% of carbon dioxide is transported by bicarbonate with the help of enzyme carbonic anhydrase. 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is carried out by oxyhemoglobin as a carbaminohemoglobin. In this state, partial pressure of CO2 is high. It gets bound to blood, whereas the alveoli where partial pressure of CO2 is low and partial pressure of O2 is high, it gets removed from the blood. Respiratory rhythms in maintained by the respiratory center in the medulla, respiratory rhythm center in medulla region of brain, pneumatics center in the pons region of a brain, and chemocentral area in the medulla can alter the respiratory mechanism.